Welcome to Perspectives, a special presentation of the Power of the Patient Project. Today's guest is Robert Pardi. And now, here is your host, Charlotte Grinnell.
I'm Charlotte Grinnell, and welcome to Perspectives, presented by the Power of the Patient Project. My guest today is Robert Pardi, who is a certified life coach. Robert has a fascinating story to share and will be telling us about the benefits of life coaching. Robert joined us today from his hometown in Abruzzo, where he has lived for many years and has established his practice. Welcome, Robert. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. I think what you guys are doing is just extremely important and inspirational, so I'm glad to be a part of it.
Yeah, so let's begin with your story. Tell me about the heartwarming journey that you went through with your wife when she was ill and how it led you to become a life coach.
Sure. Actually, the amazing thing is, I think I became a life coach being with my wife. So my wife was an MD PhD student studying in New York. And at that time, I had been offered a job. I was working in finance, and I had been offered a job in the Middle East, in Abu Dhabi. We had decided between the two of us that it would be a great thing to do at a young age because it gave me a lot of vacation time, and she was doing her PhD. And she said, you know what, I can come and visit you every 4 to 6 weeks, or we could meet in a different country. And it sounded all great and fantastic, and it was fun. And she decided when she finished her PhD to take a year off before doing her MD. And to live in the United Arab Emirates, you have to do a health screening. There's screening for a bunch of different things, but I said to her, I said, you know what, why don't you just do a full physical? And they found out that she was just about to turn 31, stage 3 breast cancer, which was extremely unusual, one, for a woman that age, but also being the 90s, the late 90s, even though she had lumps when she was younger, no one tested women then because It was sort of just, oh, you have cystic breasts, it runs in your family, don't worry about it. So that started our journey. And really before taking the job in the Middle East, she and I had discussed my wanting to leave finance and do something that I wanted to have more impact. Finance comes from, I grew up in with a dysfunctional alcoholic father. So I wanted to make as much money as possible and be independent. So that's pretty much what led me to finance, but it wasn't this huge passion, let's say. Mm-hmm. So she then battled breast cancer for the next 11 years. It was way above and beyond what anyone expected. They had originally told me she had 18 to 24 months. She asked me to be the front man. And she said, look, I don't want to know any of the specifics. I'm studying to be a doctor. I know enough to be dangerous to myself. Please handle it. I want to do the most aggressive treatment possible. And that's where I back away. So I became her surrogate, dealing with the medical system. At that point in time, dealing with insurance, which I have to say, I believe it's improved. At least it improved during our 11 years. But at the beginning, it was very, very difficult. And also, they wanted to reuse chemotherapy she had already used, and the insurance would say, but she's already used that chemotherapy, so it's not effective. And the oncologist would say, yeah, but when we're adding it to a different chemotherapy, then the two of them combined. And during that, not only did I have to be the front man for her making decisions, but also wound up becoming a coach in a lot of different ways to help her achieve her dreams. She did. She became the head of palliative care of New York Hospital.
Wow.
And she decided she had always wanted to be involved in some sort of cancer research before even being diagnosed. But when she was diagnosed, she decided to pursue palliative care because she said, who better to understand?
Yeah.
And I mean, it was amazing to see her evolution. But I sort of had to be, it sounds really corny, right? The wind beneath her wings to a certain extent, because I had to protect her from the truth,
Yeah.
help her physically as well. And when I look back at photos now, I'm amazed how sick she looked, and I didn't personally see it. But that led me to really enjoy having that human aspect in my life, because the odd thing was I went to all her chemotherapy appointments, and basically she was under chemo for 11 years. And I met, normally I had met women, and I remember meeting one woman who her husband divorced her when she was diagnosed, when she found out she had breast cancer. And I started to go to the appointments with her as well, because I couldn't imagine someone doing it alone. And that built this whole passion. But when she passed away, my gut instinct was, okay, I racked up a ton of debt. I don't know how I'm going to get out of debt. I'm going to go to Dubai and I'm going to go back into finance. And when I was there, I couldn't find my rhythm. And part of what coaching is in general, it's very interesting because coaching is sort of based on cognitive behavioral therapy, which is actually based on stoicism. If you really go back, like to the roots of everything, and there's something called values clarification. So I started looking at my key values and realized how much had changed being her caregiver. And that's really what led me to say, and I had an amazing job, an amazing lifestyle in Dubai, and I always had this dream that I wanted to live in Italy because I had Italian blood. And just one day I told my business partner, I said, you know what? Here are my 2 suitcases. I'm going. And I showed up in Rome. I didn't speak the language. I didn't have a job. I didn't know anyone. I didn't have an apartment. I had this, little tiny, at that time it really wasn't an Airbnb, but you could call it an Airbnb, and started on my journey and became a life coach while I was here in Italy. And then I started my practice as a volunteer because I like the idea of giving back and coaching people. And basically it was a caregiver that, was the survivor because they lost their partner or a family member or someone important. And it slowly evolved because what I realized was I was hanging on to a quote real job because I wanted security. And I was fooling myself because there never is security, right? And how much money I was making in Dubai, I couldn't save my wife, right? And I finally made a decision to make it full time and actually create a real business out of it, where the idea was, because I had made a small investment in a tour company in Italy, which unfortunately went bankrupt during the COVID, but the idea was to actually bring people also to Italy for retreats, because I had a few people that came from the States that stayed in the small little town I live in for 21 days. And we did sort of like an American detox coaching.
Oh, wow.
And everything was cooking lessons. It was going hiking in the mountain, mindfulness. And so the idea was to grow it into that, which of course now has changed because of COVID, which is also interesting because when I found one of my core values is curiosity. So I have to be curious, right? The COVID, like a change in my plans. So let me be open to see what it does.
Wow, that sounds amazing. Especially the retreat. I mean, I know a lot of people who would absolutely love to do that when everything, hopefully goes back to normal. But sounds like you had such an incredible journey, and it's just amazing. And you mentioned cognitive behavioral therapy, and I was a psych minor, so I learned a little bit about it. And it's amazing how much it's always been there, but especially now, so much is coming out about it that it can help so many different things that people didn't even realize before. So is that like a big part of your practice as well?
Yeah, I don't necessarily follow a specific model, whether it's cognitive behavioral therapy or other psychological profiles or metrics or methodologies, because it's really based on the individual.
Right.
But one of the things that I found more than anything else with CBT is that CBT is much more functional. And that's why it was very interesting to me when I found out a lot of it is based on Stoicism, which was a philosophy, which is why I think CBT is something that you carry with you during the day.
Yeah.
These are practices that you put into your lifestyle, which create great transformation. And I'm a big believer in resilience, and I'm a big believer in that we're all resilient. We really are, or else the human population would have never survived. But a lot of the times we don't understand how to live resilience, because resilience means that you're comfortable with change and you're comfortable with transformation and loss, basically, because whenever there's change, there's going to be loss. So, and CBT is very strong in helping you deal with that.
Yeah. And I know that you developed the drive approach, and could you explain this a little bit more?
Sure. It's an easy way to explain to someone what we're going to do together. And so the acronym reads very nicely, DRIVE, because I believe in the whole idea of life is to drive forward, right? We're not supposed to drive with the rear view mirror, which is basic therapy, right? You're always looking in the rear view mirror, trying to figure out why things happened. And, like I think of my dad, I'm so grateful my father was who he was. I mean, it wasn't easy as a kid, of course. So looking at it now, right? But it gave me the skills to actually be able to take care of my wife, to take the chance to come to Italy, to see there's no stability, right? Because when you're with an alcoholic, there is no stability. You don't know what's going to happen one day to the next. So I came up with drive because I was trying to think of going forward, right? So you're looking forward, you're not looking backwards. And it is a way for people to understand that we're going to discover. So the first thing, there's a statistic, and I think it's really interesting. Most people believe they're self-aware, but if you really do a scientific study and you sit down and you have them do this study, only 10% of people are self-aware. 10% of the 100% that say they're self-aware.
Wow.
Because a lot of people need to hold on to a definition of who they are, because it is the way they confront life. So in the discovery process, what we're trying to understand is how you've been living, what limiting beliefs do you carry, what are your North Star values? What is it that really drives you? Not what society says or what religion says or what your family says. And then we go to R, which I call reflect. And basically what that means is we're taking a look at, and I would say it's more here where we're starting to poke at your own resilience and understanding maybe what you've been saying is true that's not true. Like I could tell you for the discovery, right? When I was in Dubai, my definition of success was no longer money or, what was in the bank or position or title or anything like that. But my North Star value was something completely different. It was connection. It was curiosity. So that was the discovery. And then the reflect was, a truth that I would tell myself was, I'm not a published life coach. So I'm not, it's going to be very difficult to make it in life coaching. Who says that's true? Right? So that's what the reflect is. And then which I call impact, is basically you're now taking what you know about yourself and you're trying to figure out how those things can lead you into a state of flow. Because if we're not living life in a state of flow, and that that also means not resisting life, but really when I'm talking about a state of flow, what I'm talking about more is the fact that you are being stretched to a point where it's motivating, it's stimulating, but it's not exhausting.
Mm-hmm.
So how can you take those, you've let go of your limiting beliefs, you have let go of these untruths, and you're moving forward. And then we validate everything by saying, okay, this is your plan of action. Is it achievable? And it's not necessarily the SMART goal type of, it's got to be measurable. It has to be stimulating. You're not going to want to rebuild or redesign your life if it is not tickling you, for lack of a better word, right? And then the E is execute, which you live your life on a daily basis as this sort of new person with their eyes open, seeing the world in a different way. And that is the most critical part, because there is something that's called upper limit, and we're all born with it actually. And it is when we start to hit a certain level of happiness, we regress because it feels uncomfortable and we're afraid of it. And so the execute is to sit there every day and be a warrior for your own life, saying, no, this is the new life I want. Because you're confronted with people that think you're nuts, or, oh, you're different than you were, and you feel bad because you're different. There's something called the Jonas complex, which basically comes from the Bible and all of that. But it is when you are afraid to succeed because you're going to make the person that you care about look like they're not succeeding.
Yeah.
And all of that comes into play, and you have to be really diligent in the execution phase. And that's why I call it execute, because it's not that you're just living a new life. You're executing on a new philosophy until it becomes habit. And it's really interesting. One of the reasons why, first, we already have a negative bias, right, in our brain. But one of the reasons why when something bad happens, we create a catastrophe in our brain, which sometimes it happens. Look, it happened to me as well, right? So, but most of the time it's not that. So when it's not the catastrophe, we feel a release. We feel that finally it's not as bad, and dopamine is released in our brain, and we get addicted to the dopamine. And so we're anticipating being relieved. Technically, we know it's not going to be as bad as we're thinking, but we live in that horrible state so we can get the rush of dopamine at the end. And part of the execution in drive is to become addicted to what I call, what if I can effing pull this off? Waking up in the morning and saying, what if I can do it? And that's the rush.
Yeah.
So let's execute. So that's what I hope to do for my clients. It's how I live my life. I call, like I created a hashtag, but it was something I've always said to myself. I like to live my life as possibility in action, because at the end of the day, what we're going to leave, and Bonnie Ware, she wrote an amazing book. She was a palliative care nurse, and she wrote a book, The 5 Regrets of the Dying. Also, what I saw with my wife and a lot of our friends that we met over those 11 years, unfortunately passed away. And so what I saw is what we leave at the end of the day is the example of how we lived our life. How we're going to be remembered more than anything else.
Yeah.
That people remember the example. And so that's why I say possibility in action. I want my niece and nephew, for example, to, when I'm not around anymore, to have seen someone that, as Brene Brown would say, dared greatly. Take the chance, and yeah, a lot of times there are factors, there's money and health and everything else, but that's what makes coaching very important. Because, you know, when I talk about daring greatly, and if you think of the idea of an arena, and the arena we live in, really as human beings, is the arena of change. We know more than ever about change in the pandemic, right? That's where we live. Now we can stay outside and say, okay, I don't want to deal with change, or we go inside and we confront change. But we might need someone to train us or to show us where the tools are, to help us sharpen the tools or to wield the tools. And that's really why I sort of love what I'm doing, right? Because I'm able to participate with the person. At the end of the day, I'm not doing for them. I'm showing them how to do.
Yeah. That's
So
so interesting, and especially the you've mentioned a couple times like the North Star values and first establishing what those are. I was having a conversation with my family when we were talking about New Year's resolutions, and we were talking about how, you know, being able to reflect and figure out what those values are, because most times when there's unhappiness, it's because you're going against one of your core values and you don't even realize it. So being able to, you know, pinpoint those and really establish that in your mind and then go through the approach that you were talking about, I could see where that would be so helpful, and being able to get to a different place where you're more aware of these things would be like so great. And you mentioned some of the benefits already, but what to you are like the big benefits of having a life coach and to a person's mental being and overall wellness?
sure. I mean, the biggest benefit overall, and it's such a buzzword, but it really does fit, is personal agency. And that means really being the director of your own life. That is the key benefit through a coaching journey. It doesn't necessarily just have to be a coach, but being self-aware. And all of that, it's been scientifically proven, all of this increases self-confidence, increases self-esteem, serenity, sense of purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And that's another one of those words that has been thrown out there. And you know what? Purpose doesn't mean we all have to go save the world, you know, be Greta and save the environment and everything else. Purpose is when you want to do something and give the benefits away. So it could be cooking a great meal for somebody. You know, you're not doing it to post it on Instagram, which we've all become, you know, addicted to, basically. Having a sense of purpose comes from the self-awareness. It increases joy, it increases gratitude. Gratitude is another interesting thing because, you know, everyone from Oprah Winfrey to I don't know who else has talked about gratitude in the gratitude journal. But gratitude is not just acknowledging the beautiful things in your life. Gratitude has to be connected to what it would be like to have lost that in your life. And that produces true gratitude, pure gratitude. You know, there could be days that, you know, I don't know, maybe I'm frustrated with something, and it's not just looking at nature, but it's thinking, wow, what if I didn't have this anymore? You know, to walk in the mountains of Abruzzo. Other benefits are, you know, optimism and positivity in your life, and that's why a coach can't do it for you. Because you won't have the optimism, you won't have the joy, you'll be watching it, right? A coach is there to help you earn it. A coach is there to, I wish there was actually, to tell you the truth, life coaching, I've not been a fan of the term because it's a little ambiguous. It doesn't really hone down to what it is. But I think that A life coach is a facilitator of helping someone connect to, I didn't know that was on, to connect to their own wisdom, to their own power. It's so dangerous for us to compare ourselves. Someone that hears my story could say a million different things, great and against it. I was a guy in finance, so of course, he must have been able to leave his job and go live in Italy. But there's lots of things that I did have to deal with as well. So your wisdom is different than someone else's wisdom, but it's powerful because it's yours and because it's unique. And we tend to use the word extraordinary a lot when we describe other people, but that really just becomes an excuse for us not to do it. Well, they're extraordinary.
Yeah.
But no, we all are. Yeah, there's the Mozarts of the world, but even Einstein, he said at the beginning he made tons of mistakes. He changed his theories I don't know how many times. But we see at the end of the day the end product of someone and think they're extraordinary, but we don't know what they've gone through. And so that's a coach helps you more than anything else understand the value of your life's journey, of your personality. There is something called the hero's journey, and we tend to think of it as something for heroes, right? The hero's journey is basically, the Star Wars movies, or Neo in the Matrix, or Harry Potter. It's this self-discovery, becoming a hero, but each of us, we're living that life. And I have a really favorite quote, which I share often, and it's from a guy, a writer and author named Richard Bach. And he's the one that wrote Jonathan Livingston Seagull, but he's written a bunch of other books. And he has a quote that basically states, "We are each born with a block of marble and the tools to sculpt it. We can drag it behind us untouched, we can pound it into gravel, or we can shape it into glory."
Oh, I love that.
We each have that block of marble. That's what makes us unique. And it's once we allow ourselves to value that part of us, that's where I think that we connect to a power that is incredible to craft our lives. So I guess that I sort of answered the question. I went around in a big way.
You did. You definitely did. And I love that quote. I love that. And so how does a person find the right life coach? Like, how do you decide the best match for yourself?
That's the most difficult thing. And there are so many titles as well. I always tell somebody to not look at the title, because there's exponential coach, there's transformational coach, there's empowering coach. There's so many different titles. What it actually comes down to, and the power of coaching, is when the coach enters in empathy with a client. And the only way to really find that is to actually test a coach and sit down and talk to the coach and understand their story, where they're from, background, whatever makes you feel that you're in a safe environment to start to, walk through that dark tunnel. It's not necessarily a dark tunnel, but you're starting to look at everything that has been holding you back. And there's a lot of times you don't want to accept it, right? Yeah. So you want to feel safe with the person. And it's the only thing anyone I've ever worked with, it's interesting because I don't advertise. I don't even have Facebook. I never believed that was the way someone could find a coach. So I worked off referrals. And I've always said, let's talk for 15 minutes, 30 minutes, because it's you. It's all about you. It really has nothing to do with me. I am, or the coach becomes a mirror to a certain extent to show you the truth and to show you your potential. But you have to be comfortable being with that person reflecting back at you. So
Yeah.
that's empathy, right? So.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I mean, that's all the questions that I have for you. If there's anything like last that you want to say or that you feel like you haven't said yet, or
No, I definitely said everything. I love to share that quote, so I always try to get it in wherever
yeah,
I so, but no, I hope for, because it's very interesting, the power of the patient. I wasn't sure exactly who your audience was, but I like when I reached out to Bob is the fact that um, having walked through being a caregiver for so long and how, my wife died in 2009, so the power of the patient didn't even exist at that point in time, and seeing the evolution and what you guys bring to the table, I thought to myself, okay, this is, a population I would like to speak to more, for people to understand that it is possible to rebuild a life, as horrible as that sounds, because you suffer a horrible loss, and um, you lose your identity. The thing I found most interesting when I started really doing the work internally and then externally is a lot of the pain of loss comes from the loss of our identity.
that's really interesting. Yeah,
We're not the husband or the wife or the brother or the sister or the son or the daughter anymore. That had expectations, which now we have to let go of those expectations and say that's not the life I'm going to have.
right.
A lot of the pain of the loss doesn't come just, the grieving process doesn't come just from the person we lost, but the identity we lost and having to rebuild a new identity. It's really weird because so many people talk about the stages of grief, and that whole scientific study was based on looking at the stages that somebody dying goes through, not the survivor.
Oh, that's so interesting. I never thought of it like that.
And so the survivor sits there, and you know what? You don't go through those stages.
Yeah,
You have completely different needs. There's a lot, of course, you have anger and stuff like that, but it's it's on a different trajectory.
yeah,
It's so but anyway, so I hope at least somebody that's listening to this realizes that whatever is happening in life doesn't have to be an endpoint. It doesn't have to define them at all. You could use it
yeah,
if you find the strength to do it, and that's what a coach helps. But you can use whatever you've been through to build a great life. And I think that's why I loved living in Rome, because my God, how many buildings were built with half the building is like from 2,000 years ago, and then they stuck on like modern structure to it.
yeah.
And it's just an example, right,
Right.
of building from the past. So
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, thank you so much for joining me today. I really enjoyed our discussion. It was so interesting, and
I
I'm
was
really
very,
glad that I got to chat with you.
me too. I was very, very happy to do it. And if you ever find yourself back in Italy again for any reason, please reach out,
I
because
definitely will.
I have to say, small Italy is really like stunning, which means all the small little towns that people just